I definitely felt like I had failed myself, because if we can heal ourselves, and I believe that wholeheartedly, how come I couldn't heal this? Was always the question. And I think the most important thing for anyone who's on this journey to understand is you can't fail yourself. No matter what the choice is, you can't fail yourself, because the whole point of this journey isn't what you did or didn't do with supplements, what you did or didn't do with nutrition, what you did or didn't do with surgery. It's about, did I make that next step towards myself? Did I make that next step towards learning everything that there is to learn about who I am and why I'm here and what I can offer to myself, not even to the world, but to yourself?
So the big question is this. We know spontaneous remissions and so-called miracle cures exist. We also know they aren't so spontaneous after all. I'm living proof of this, having cured my quote-unquote incurable illness. There's something to how this happens. So how do we, as humans with chronic symptoms, tap into this so-called miraculous healing capacity? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Dr. Erin Hayford, and welcome to the Sacred Illness Podcast. Before we begin today's episode, just my standard medical disclaimer. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical concerns. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. Today is a really special episode because for you OG listeners, you'll remember Oriana used to be on the show, and I have her back with me today. So Oriana and I used to host the show together. We did some really cool episodes back in the beginning when this podcast was finding its feet, and we had some really cool conversations to set the stage for what the conversations have moved toward. So Oriana is back today. And I don't think we ever did a podcast for you, did we, before?
Nope.
Yeah. So welcome back. Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to be able to do this with you again today.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm really excited to be here.
Oriana is here in the States with me. She's in Las Vegas, Nevada. She is a writer and an artist, and a lot of her writing is really beautifully channeling a lot of the healing work she's doing, a lot of the journey that she's been on. So I'll share links at the end where you can get in touch and see Oriana's work and follow her journey. I know you and I have talked. I know so much of your story, but I also don't think I've ever heard you just tell it. You've been through a lot lately, a lot of culmination is happening in your journey, and not that we're ever done, but I feel like you're arriving in some really beautiful places lately. So without further ado, where does this journey begin?
I think the best place to start is to explain where I was and where I am. So I grew up in the trenches, basically. I didn't have supportive parents. They were both very emotionally absent in different ways. I had an older brother who was very much in that same realm as them emotionally. And then there was me who had all of these really big emotions and felt everything and felt my whole household, but also felt like I had to keep everything together and try to always know when somebody was going to have their next explosion or know when there was going to be some big blowout. It was my entire family, all of my extended family too. The women in the family were very much take care of the men, not show emotions until something really big would happen. And then they'd have this huge explosion. And it was kind of wild growing up in that scenario. And so that brought me into my adulthood. I was a young mom and was the strength of the family. If my grandma needed something, I was the one she called. If my mom needed something, my mom was really sick. She had an autoimmune condition. She had lupus and she had a lot of mental health issues as a result. She was an addict. And so if she needed something, I was always there. I was the one who she called. And so I just stepped into that role in my own little family unit where if my husband needed something, I was there. If my son needed something, I was there. And that grew into my professional life. I have done a lot of different professions in my life. I went to school for psychology, and while I was in school, I was working for a cardiovascular research department. So whatever I was asked to do, I was always the best at. And not because anybody asked me to be that way. It was just the persona that I was carrying, this idea of who I needed to be in every setting. So fast forward a little bit, In 2017, my husband and I started talking about our life. Our son was getting ready to be 18 years old. We both were working full time. We also had two businesses that we were running. I was running my own wellness practice. It was massage therapy and Reiki and kinesiology and things like that. But it morphed into me working with professional athletes. Physically, it was a lot harder. You're lifting these big men and moving and, all these things. And so I thought that a lot of what I was starting to experience at that time was because of that job. I had a lot of pain in my body. I'd fall asleep and my hands would start burning. I wasn't sleeping well. And things like that were happening at the same time that we were discussing, is this how we want to continue our lives? Do we want to stay in Colorado? We're both born and raised in Colorado. And we decided that we really wanted to travel. So we decided to get a van and do van life. We thought it would be really fun and exciting. And it was. We did it for 5 years, but I was doing two things in conjunction. I was living a dream and I was dealing with a ton of physical symptoms that I just didn't understand. And so it started off with pain and not sleeping. And then it went to severe GI symptoms. I would eat anything and I would have these doubling over pains in my stomach. A lot of times I would just lay on the bathroom floor with the shower running on me because I didn't know what else to do. And so that was when my journey with doctors started. Previous to that, I hardly ever even got a cold. I maybe got the flu every 4 years or something like that. I just wasn't really a sick kind of adult. As a child, I had a lot of GI issues. I had a lot of constipation. I had a lot of those types of GI issues, but into adulthood, I just didn't. So my journey with doctors started at that point. And so I did find a good holistic doctor. He was fine. He was a good person. He was very encouraging. But my husband, a couple of days ago, found the box of supplements that I had. He was like, "What is that box up there?" I opened it and I started crying because it is a huge box of at least 50 supplements that I was taking to try to feel better. I now realize how significantly I was looking outside of me for the answer to what was going on. And so obviously those things weren't helping. I was having fainting spells. I was having these outrageous panic attacks. I never even had anxiety in my life. So this was so new for me that when people would say, "Oh, it's just anxiety," I'm like, what does that mean? I didn't know what to do with any of that. And so I started seeing GI doctors and primary care doctors, and they're like, "Your blood work is fine. You probably just have constipation. Maybe you're just sensitive to the pain." That was playing into the trust issues that I had growing up. Not having support from my parents, always having to be the one that was put together and the strong one and the stoic one and the pillar of every family and all of those things. And so I'm having all of these symptoms and all of these things going on that I can't control. And I've controlled every single portion of my life up until now. And so that led me to you because I couldn't live a daily life. I could barely get up. I could go outside and walk around for 2 minutes and I would get exhausted and have to lay back down. It was just a mess and so different than the life I was leading previously. I could do everything and anything I wanted whenever. And so I found you on Instagram. I saw a post that you had posted when you were first changing your practice to this somatic, going back inwards to yourself. And I was like, wait, she gets it. Because that's what I was looking for. In that holistic space, you would find little bits of it, right? People would say something and you'd be like, "Yeah, that's it." But then it would just float away somewhere and there'd be another supplement. And so I went to your page and I read your story and I went through all of it. And I was just like, this is the missing piece for me, because there's no way that there are people in this world who have spontaneous healings or do find healing in their life through just what I'm trying to do. We just constantly fight with the doctors until they give us something that makes us better. There's no way. And so I called you and we had a consultation. And what I found through you is trust, because it wasn't you that healed me, right? It was the fact that you became the conduit for me to heal those wounds of trust, to heal those wounds of support, and to realize that I don't have to do this by myself, and that I'm not a failure because I couldn't do it by myself. And there were moments in our work together where I was like, is this going to work? Because was always that voice that, what if this person who's supporting me then leaves me? Can I still do this by myself? I started to get better. I mean, there were tons of my symptoms that started to get better. My GI symptoms started to get better. I started to have somewhat more energy, but I was still dealing with this low iron thing. I went to see a hematologist to get iron infusions. That would make me feel better for a little while, but then my iron would get low again. And so still dealing with this chronic low iron situation, which created a lot of emotions because I was always tired. It was making me feel like I had severe mental illness, which brought a lot of fear with my mom's situation. I had been seeing an OBGYN. She was like, yeah, you have fibroids. Here are some things you can do. So I was on some sort of hormone thing, but you can only be on it for like a year. And I hated it. I didn't like the way it made me feel. And then there was another, I forget what it's called now, but it basically stops the heavy bleeding. And again, I didn't like the way that it made me feel. And that's something that I think changed the next part of how I see our system. Because when I would tell her, it was always dismissed immediately. Like, everybody's always fine on it. I don't understand what the problem is. And I had already told her I am sensitive to these types of things. And so I started talking to her about, what are other options? Is there ways to remove the fibroid to stop the bleeding? And she's like, well, those are definitely more invasive options if you'd want to explore those. And so we did start to explore those. And I had a lot of fear around surgically removing something from my body. I'd never had a surgery before. She was like, let's just start one step at a time. Let's try removing the fibroid and see if that works. A lot of times that works. Well, once she got in there, the fibroid is the size of a cantaloupe. There's 5 other ones in there, and there's 6 on the outside. They can't remove the ones on the outside with the procedure that she was doing. And so she goes, I removed the ones from the inside. We did an ablation. Let's see if that helps. It didn't at all, not even a little. I think it made it worse, honestly. She goes, so the next step is a hysterectomy. You'll get to keep your ovaries, so you won't go into surgical menopause. You'll be able to do all of that naturally. It still took me a really long time to agree to that surgery, because most of the people I've surrounded myself with are holistic. That was something that I was still holding on to very tightly because of how often I was dismissed by allopathic medicine systems. And so the next big piece of the puzzle that came together for me was, we don't know. Nobody really knows. Everybody is on their own unique journey, and every single thing that happens to us is ours to figure out. And that part for me was what I needed to fully turn around and face myself. Why can't I make this decision for myself? Why am I still looking outside of myself for people to tell me if it's okay or not? And that's because that's what that little girl wanted when her parents were going through all that stuff, and they weren't there for her. Every single time she went through something, she needed somebody to be there for her, and no one was. I had a couple of friends who were like sending me articles about why you never get a hysterectomy and why it's the worst thing you can do for your body. And I'm just like, how is this holistic part any less fear-based than the allopathic part? We're doing the same thing, just in different ways, but ultimately we're scaring people into not trusting their bodies and not trusting themselves. And so I sat with it, and I sat with myself and what this means for me, if it's right for me in where I'm at. And then we did our session together. All of those questions were answered. What I realized is I wasn't just carrying my stories. I'm not just carrying the pieces of me that I pushed down into my womb, but I'm carrying the lineage of women that have pushed themselves down and made themselves small and stood in these spaces too long that weren't for them. I was carrying all of it for them. I was the little girl managing the household. even if I was only managing it emotionally and taking everything and bringing it here because I couldn't express anything. And it was all living there. It all got pushed into there, and it was all living there as these tiny little solid bubbles of emotion, right? Anger and grief and sadness and all the things that I couldn't express lived in these tiny little non-cancerous tumors. And so I made the decision. I decided that I'm going to just let all of that go and not care so much about everything that's going on around me and everything that everyone's doing, and trying to keep everybody together and never be the messy one. Because when you're the messy one, you end up like my mom, exiled from the family, nobody helping you, and everyone talking behind your back, and all the things that I saw and heard growing up. You end up like my brother. My brother is no different. He is, exiled from the family, and everybody talks behind his back. So I was never allowed to be the messy one. And so throughout my journey, I fell apart a ton of times and let myself be messy. I made this choice to untether myself from those stories, from that past me that I wanted back. I wanted that life back. But there is no future me if I stay tethered to that. If I stay tethered not only to my stories, but to my mom's stories and my nana's stories and my aunt's stories. And so made the appointment. And the day before my appointment, the doctor's office called me and said, your surgery has been canceled. And all of those feelings I hadn't felt around what people were telling me came flooding back in. What if this is the universe, some higher power telling me I'm not supposed to do this? As I sat with those emotions, I realized that's not what this is. This is that higher power, that higher self, whatever you want to call it, saying, are you going to stand in your truth? Are you going to go with your gut instead of turning around and making a different decision, which I had done in the past, because I always went back to listen to what other people told me. And so I said, when's the next time I can schedule? She goes, next Thursday. I said, all right, let's do it. It was going to have to be at a different hospital. That's a whole long story, but it worked out so perfectly because the hospital that I ended up at, they were wonderful there from the beginning to the end. The woman that did my pre-check was so fun and funny, and it was so easy. The nurses that took my blood were just so kind and compassionate, all the things that I needed to feel good about. The day of surgery, everything just went so seamlessly and smooth. And all the way to, I was nervous because the other anesthesiologist that I had wasn't unfriendly. He was just kind of cold, right? Like, here's the things, dot the lines, sign your name, that kind of stuff. Where this one came in and he talked to me, and he was a person, and he shared his life with me and who he was. And we told jokes and we laughed, and it felt good. It felt like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that higher power kept sending these messages through these people that it was all going to be okay. And I went back, and we had been talking about me playing this joke on one of the guys that's back there who plays the music. And he always plays weird music, I guess. And I was like, you're not going to play your weird music, are you? And he was like, I'll play whatever music you want. And then we talked about that. All I remember was the joke, going to sleep. And then I woke up, and same thing. The person who was there had the kindest voice, and he was so gentle and very attentive. And when I moved from there to the recovery room, I told the nurse, I keep getting these waves of anxiousness. And she's like, let me go get your person. That always makes it better. She immediately went and got my husband, and she was like, I'm just going to let him do everything. She gave him the list of things that I needed to do. And he was like, okay. I could feel my body calm down because he was there, and I knew he was not going to make me go any faster or any slower than I needed to. I am now, this will be 8 weeks on Thursday. So I'm almost at 8 weeks post-op. And I realized that nothing was taken from me. You can't take the essence and the love and the support that your womb is. You can't take it away. It lives there forever. It was just a part of me that was holding a lot of things that we didn't need to hold anymore. And so that has given me a lot of freedom in knowing that there's something bigger on the horizon now. We've gotten to the end of that bridge, and now I get to figure out how to live. And that's where the journey continues. There will be more opportunities for me to take down more layers and more walls, and all the things I've already done, they'll just be different. But at least I'll have the opportunity to say, this is my life, not someone else's life, not my mom's life, not this person that was built through all of this trauma and all of these things. And so that's the story and where I'm at now, and where we'll go, who knows?
Who knows? But you are on the path, right? I think it just so perfectly encapsulates what this journey becomes when we listen to our illness. It puts us on the path of our life, like you just said. You always were in touch with yourself and following that, but now it feels like those massive layers that you shed in the last few months and years of letting go of control, trusting people, trusting the medical system. I mean, I know how huge that was for you. Letting yourself be taken care of, letting yourself, we had talked about this too, this feeling of having surgery is like, I failed, I wasn't able to heal it myself, a piece of control, and having to reorient your whole mindset around that too. The way you told that story is so perfect, how it shows us how all of the ways in which illness not even just manifests in the body, but what it brings up in relationships or in doctor-patient dynamics or emotionally or whatever. It was asking you every step of the way to release all of those stories and all of those things that you had picked up in childhood that were not yours, and to heal them. And even that last redirection with the surgery being canceled, to me, that's the most powerful signal of there is an intelligence to this process, and there's an intelligence to the body and why it shows up and when it shows up and how it shows up. Like, your body couldn't have caused the surgery to get canceled. There's something else at play there saying, this is the last test for you to say, I choose this, I'm releasing this, I'm trusting this process, I'm trusting myself. And it was exactly what you needed, all the people you needed, all the personas you needed, the fact that it was at a different hospital, all those people were there. To me, this journey is so much about trust and surrender, and leaning into that intuitive voice that's pulling you along, and trusting that even what feels like a redirection or a roadblock or a failure, it's part of it. It's part of what you have to learn in order to get across that bridge, like you're saying. So listeners, now you can understand why I wanted to put this episode back to back with the previous one, because in that case, Claire did not need a hysterectomy, and her redirection was COVID. She had her hysterectomy scheduled. She was going to do it, and then COVID happened and it got canceled for a year. It was just sort of like, we're canceling it and we don't know when we're going to redo it because it's COVID. And so for her, that year gave her the time and space to do research, access this different therapy she did, etc. And in your case, you made this choice, and then the things that were coming up were just helping you to get real clear on this path and led you to the hysterectomy. And so the really important thing that I want people to take away from is, just as you said, part of your learning how to live is there's no right way to live. There's no right way to heal. There's no right way to deal with anything. You can be holistic with a hysterectomy if it is the right thing for your body. You can be holistic with 50 supplements if it's the right thing for your body. But side note, I don't think that many supplements is ever right. But anyway, that's the takeaway, right? And I think that was a huge turning point for you to be like, this can look however I want it to look, and a hysterectomy can be part of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that was originally how I felt. I definitely, like you said, felt like I had failed myself. How? Because if we can heal ourselves, and I believe that wholeheartedly, how come I couldn't heal this? Was always the question. And I think the most important thing for anyone who's on this journey to understand is you can't fail yourself. No matter what the choice is, you can't fail yourself, because the whole point of this journey isn't what you did or didn't do with supplements, what you did or didn't do with nutrition, what you did or didn't do with surgery. It's about, did I make that next step towards myself? Did I make that next step towards learning everything that there is to learn about who I am and why I'm here and what I can offer to myself, not even to the world, but to yourself. That was something that was really important with the work that we did. You never told me how to heal it. You never told me how to fix it. You helped me read the map so that I could tell myself. And The reason why that's so important is because throughout my journey, I have met so many people, not just doctors and holistic practitioners and acupuncturists, but people who are your friends who want to tell you how to fix it based off of something they read or something they heard or something they learned at some point in their life. And this can turn into a very slippery slope of what we're really trying to do is be compassionate and help, but we're actually not, because we're making this journey more confusing for them. But I think you have to go through all of those spaces to be able to truly be like, this isn't my journey, this is their journey. And so that was why our work together was so profound, because I didn't have that. I definitely didn't have it growing up. That was why that was such a big piece of my puzzle, being able to say, okay, I have this person that I know is supportive, and now I can deep dive into these other options for myself and feel comfortable knowing that if I need extra support, I have this support and these tools that this person has given me.
Hey, Sacred Illness listeners, Dr. Erin here. If the stories on this podcast have stirred something in you, if you're hearing these conversations and thinking, that feels true for me too, then this message is for you. You know by now that illness is not a random malfunction. It's a message. It's a call. It's a sacred, if not difficult, invitation to remember who you really are. But hearing the paradigm is one thing. Walking the path yourself is another. Where do you even begin? How do you translate that knowing into a daily practice? How do you move from listening to the message of your symptoms to actually understanding it step by step and learning how to heal with it? That is exactly why I created the Sacred Illness community. It's a living, guided container for those who are ready to answer the call of their own body. This is where the philosophy becomes a map, where you move from insight to integration. Inside, you'll find my full Sacred Illness blueprint. This is a 9-chapter journey that guides you through the mythic stages of illness as initiation. It weaves together the somatic education, nervous system science, and deep self-inquiry we talk about here on the podcast. But it's more than a course. It's a community. It's a place for growth, not just commiseration. You'll have access to live events, somatic yoga, intuitive eating courses, and a library of EFT and self-hypnosis tracks, and a forum to connect with others who are speaking this same language of the body. This is for the listener who's done searching for answers and is ready to begin the real journey of transformation. Membership is just $37 a month, and you can cancel anytime. And as a thank you for listening to this podcast, you can use coupon code PODCAST, that's all caps, PODCAST, at checkout for 20% off your first month. If you're ready to get started, check out the link below in the show notes or go to mysacredillness.com, enter the coupon code, and get started today. This is your next step. The path is here, and it's ready for you when you're ready to take it. Okay, let's get back to the podcast. Part of my journey was getting pushed to the point where I had to rely on myself because that's usually part of the problem is we're not trusting ourselves. We're not listening to ourselves. We're not believing ourselves. We're just in our head living from that past programming. We're not being ourselves. And so I think about my journey and I listened to this person. I did that thing. I did this thing, just bumping and bouncing around from book to modality to healer to this, to that, to the other thing. And I think it's all part of the path. But I think what I see happen to a lot of us is we get to a place of hopelessness because we're like, okay, I've done literally everything. I've done all the conventional stuff. I've done all the woo stuff. I've done all the whatever stuff. And maybe some of it helps, but I still have symptoms. I'm trying to get away from this idea that being healed means being symptom free because that's not always the case. But I think we get to this place of just feeling like not only do we still feel sick, we don't feel alive, we don't feel vibrant, we don't feel clicked into something. And so a lot of what the early healing journey is about in this weird way is to lose hope in external things, because ultimately it's trying to get you back to yourself. And because of the way the world is set up, we look externally. That's how we're trained to think about what healing is. But as you were talking to, I was like, what are the signs that something may not be for you? I think it's how it feels in your body. If it creates fear or doubt or confusion or hopelessness, if it doesn't make you feel good, then that's probably not for you. But if it resonates in your system, like you said, when you found my work and when I've found the people who did get me on path, there was just that kind of clarity, almost like a feeling of relief I'd be curious about your thoughts around that. How do you know when it's your thing?
I think there's an overwhelming feeling of this is for me. For me specifically, when I found your work as an example, when I read it, I was like, yes, this is exactly it. This is exactly what I feel deeply within myself, but don't know how to express it and don't know how to take what I know and turn it into something tangible to help me heal. And then when I would get articles from friends or people would tell me these horrific stories, I would get this buzzing feeling in my body. I just wanted to get up and run away. And had I not learned the things that I learned from you, I wouldn't have been able to be in tune with my body. I think that's why that natural progression of looking externally until we lose hope is there, is because we don't trust our bodies. We're not used to being in them. We're constantly in our heads. And so even to drop down in our body is so uncomfortable. So if you tell somebody just be in your body when you're trying to figure out your information, they'll be like, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. There definitely is a natural progression to things. And if they're on the sending end of an article or information or knowledge or whatever, they can just take that one step back and be like, is this actually going to be important for this person? Because I think if we know that somebody's going through something, we can feel in our body if it is an appropriate time and place for us to share that. And oftentimes those are the messages that really resonate with people, right? Is when we take our time to decide if it makes sense to send it to them, or is it coming from a place of fear in us? And so I think it has a lot to do with how it feels in your body, in your system. And so if you can get out of your head, even for just a small portion of time, to really feel any information, any modality, any supplement, anything that's being handed to you, I think you will probably know if it's the right thing for you or not in that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the way you phrase that. And any provider, anyone, anything that is pushing a protocol or something that just keeps kind of like, you rely on this, you rely on this, you rely on this, and nothing about it is trying to be like, and now look at yourself and what do you need and what do you know, if nothing is trying to get you in your body with the things you're trying, then there's not to say that those modalities aren't also good for you, but that's my whole shtick is this mind body work, this journey that you went on to understand. Yes, I have fibroids. Yes, it's causing anemia, fatigue, all these symptoms that you've been having. And so there's this physical thing here. There's things I can do. I can get iron infusions. I can do these things to treat what's happening physically. And what are these fibroids actually about? What are they holding? What do I need to release and work with on that emotional level to heal why they formed in the first place? So it's that both and. There has to be that both and there, right? A hysterectomy by itself will take out the fibroids, but the work you did prior to made the surgery not just a physical act. It was this actual somatic release that you did with that surgery, which makes it so much more profound. And that was part of our conversation we had before you went in for the surgery. What does this represent? What are you doing with this surgery? What does it mean for your body? And that's the important thing, is connecting with it in that way. Anything can be holistic if we're connected to it in this way where it's like, this is working in my favor. It's working for me. It's getting me to where I need to go. That hysterectomy was serving that process of this mind, body, emotional, spiritual, physical release so that I can clear the path to get back on path with myself. So it can be a gray area at first to figure out, but a lot of this is trust the path. Even what seems like a misdirection is part of it, because learning what doesn't work is part of learning what does work. Every time we think it's a dead end, it's just more information. And even if someone got a surgery and they're like, oh my God, now I'm feeling like I shouldn't have gotten a surgery because I didn't do the right work. That's not how that works. Every part of your journey is part of you learning and healing and figuring out who you are. Just because you had a surgery doesn't mean you still can't do the work. And let's talk about that part, because you had already said it beautifully, and I think it's worth highlighting. You were saying you had a hysterectomy, but that part of you that is your womb, it's still there on that emotional level. Let's say you had never done the work and you got your hysterectomy. That doesn't mean you still can't do the work. Just because it's physically gone doesn't mean that the opportunity is lost.
I think that the surgery is part of the work. Regardless of whether you did work before it or after it, it is part of it. Once I got into adulthood, I was making conscious choices to be healthier than the people in my life. My mom had lupus, my grandma had colitis. My aunt had a thyroid condition. On my dad's side of the family, there was GI cancer, there's kidney problems, and they're all in women. And so I was making these conscious decisions to give myself a better chance. So in its own right, that's healing this lineage that we're doing the healing work for. And so I think that we're doing it even if we don't feel like we're doing it. We get to a place where we haven't done a ton of inner work. Maybe we don't really even understand what any of that means. And we decide to have a hysterectomy, for instance. I think you're still doing the work because that path is going to open up something. I've noticed that a hysterectomy is like buying a new pair of shoes these days with women, because everybody you talk to has had one, but then when you start talking to them, you realize the path that it opened up for them. Even if it was to take away years and years of pain, it's opened up a new path, right? And so now you don't have these years and years of pain. And now I have the opportunity to do the inner work because I'm not in constant pain every day. When you're in constant pain, the last thing you want to do is start exploring shadows. You don't want to explore the parts of you that need to be seen and need to be heard and need to be loved. You're too tired for that. And so I think it's important for people listening to this, listening to any of your work, being a part of any of this type of journey, to know it's never too late. Because I didn't do, or because I did do, it's always there. It's always an opportunity for us, no matter what. For me, there is even work after. I didn't get my uterus removed and now I'm magically better. I still have low iron. I have to wait for those things to rebuild. So I'm still working through things as a result of that. In a world where we have technology, everything is instant. And so our mind starts to get accustomed to that. And then I'm like, well, I had my hysterectomy. I don't feel better. I must have done it wrong. It's not that. It just has now opened up a space for me to start rebuilding my iron, to start trusting my body in that way. And also to really delve into the fact that it's okay to be tired. That was a big thing for me because I was never tired. When I was doing all of those things, running businesses and having full-time jobs and helping everybody, I was never tired. And then I got to this place and it's like, you're lucky if I will go out to dinner and have to not come home. Like, we're not doing anything extra after that. So, being okay with that, because I think one of the biggest things that I noticed through this for me is that it's often not okay for women to rest. We have kids to raise and we have things to do. And now we have jobs and businesses to run. And we have all these things to do all the time. And so when we rest, we're never actually resting because we're thinking about all the things that we have to do when we're done resting. And so that was a big thing that I've started to learn. And even still now, realize that there's still layers of that for me because I do have more energy now. And it is substantially more energy than I had before the hysterectomy. And so I'm like, let's pack all these things in. I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to walk my dogs twice a day. And then my body's like, wait a minute, what are we doing? No, ma'am. And so the work is still always there. I have come to this place where I truly believe that your body is never wrong. Any choice that you make for your body is not wrong. It might not get you to the solution that you were looking for, but it's never the wrong choice. Yeah. And so even if you choose to have a hysterectomy or whatever the surgery is, it still wasn't the wrong choice. I just don't think we can be wrong. I think everything that we do is right for us, and it ultimately leads us to whatever we chose to be here for.
Totally. Illness is trying to get you to trust yourself and to trust your path. And illness is a great example of how if you're starting to go too off path for too long, something is going to pull you back in. So you never truly can be lost because there's always going to be something that's like, nope, this way. From my journey and knowing people like you and everyone I've talked to on this podcast, the resounding belief or result of getting sick is my life is better because of it. And it led me to who I'm supposed to be versus what I was doing with my life. It's always this major redirection. My last guest is writing books and poetry. She's making art. She's doing things that she wasn't doing before. She's teaching yoga. It doesn't have to be like, now I run 20 marathons and I'm president. It can be this beautiful, simple, artistic expression, or just resting and being in your body and smelling flowers. It's just, how do you want to live? Who are you? And what do you do with your time in your life when you really are being yourself? And it might be running marathons and getting into politics, like, bless your soul, but like whatever it is, right? If it is truly coming from that place of alignment, then great. And again, life is always going to let us do our thing. And there's just that thing, whatever you want to call it, God, consciousness, higher self, something, right? There's just something that to me feels undeniable at this point, just because there's been too many things, like you were saying, like the surgery getting canceled and these little things that keep pinging us onto the path. And illness, there's wisdom to the timing of it. And actually, that's something I wanted to say with your story. I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. Their friend moved to the country, started this life that they've been dreaming of, lived somewhere where they could relax and quit this job that was toxic, and then got super duper sick. There can be this thing that happens when we finally break away from survival mode. That's when our body is like, okay, now you are going to heal because you can finally take a breath and you're not in survival mode all the time. Here's all the things you've been holding. Is that what happened for you? Because it sounds like moving into the van, leaving Colorado, traveling, starting to give yourself things you'd never have. And I know symptoms were creeping up, but it sounds like the big ones hit when you guys changed your lifestyle.
Yeah, 100% that's what happened. All of these symptoms starting when I started to slow down made it that much harder. And it made my path to where I'm at that much better. It sucks that I went in to live this dream that I wanted to live, and I was dealing with all of these things, but I learned so much from that. I didn't move from my house and take my things with me. I sold everything, all of my belongings, anything that didn't fit in a van. It went to neighbors, it went to whoever needed it, every single bit of it. And so it was a cleansing as I see it now. In those moments, it certainly did not feel that way. But as I see it now, it was a cleansing, and it was perfect for me because I got to visit places and see things and be a part of nature, which I believe is a huge medicine for me in ways that I wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. And so there were all these little moments and little pockets of things that were showing me that I was on the right path, but I couldn't see it because I had a very specific expectation of the way that I wanted it to play out. I've always wanted to control my life, and I've always wanted my life to turn out exactly how I expected it. And now I realize that that's not a reality. You posted something recently that said, would you have healed had you not gotten sick? And for me, the answer is no. I sat with that for a long time because the second I didn't even read all of the slides, I read the first one and I was like, I need to really think about this. And a lot of emotions came up for me because at first I was like, but I was fine before. What was I? I had everything that I wanted. I had all of the things I wanted when I was a little girl. I had my own house. I paid my own bills. I never had to ask anybody for anything. To me, I was living my best life, right? But based off of trauma, not based off of who I really was. And had all of this stuff not happen in the way that it happened, I would have never done anything different. I would have kept living the exact same life that I was living and ultimately not lived the way that I was supposed to live. In human design, as a reflector, there's a very specific, unique way that you walk in this world. I would have never even touched that uniqueness in me had I not walked the path that I walked. I was very confident in the things that I did as my old self because I was always the best of the best of everything I walked into. Put me in it and I will do it better than everybody in the room. So that's where my confidence came from. But ask me about the beauty of me and the uniqueness of me, and I wouldn't have been able to talk about it because those were vulnerable pieces of me that I couldn't share with other people. And now I can share that and be comfortable with it and be comfortable with the fact that that uniqueness is only available to people who are ready for it, and being okay with that. And also being okay with being considered a writer and an artist now. Before, my careers were all based around performance. And writing is based around expression and how I can show up for myself. And if somebody else resonates with it, amazing. But that's a secondary piece to it. And I even have gotten into ecstatic dancing, and it's now part of my morning routine where I play music that resonates with my soul, and I go out into my driveway and I dance like no one's watching, which I have never done. It's always been a big part of my personality. I always loved dancing, but I thought it had to be structured. You had to learn how to square dance. You had to learn how to this kind of dance. And so I never did it because I wasn't sure I was going to be good at it. And then I realized moving the way that my body wants me to move is so much more beautiful for me. And so just all of these things, I wouldn't have found them otherwise. I just wouldn't have. And even though there's a lot of emotion around that, it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm. And it feels so perfect that your hysterectomy created this space that all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, what do I fill this space with? What's here now that there's this emptiness? And it kickstarted this whole journey. And you said it so beautifully, which I want to hone in on it for people to really remember and hear it. People ask me this often, like, well, I'm taking medication so I don't feel my symptoms. Is that bad? Because then I can't talk to them. Should I not take meds? Should I not take this? Should I not get surgery? It's more about when you take the medication or when you get that surgery, like you said, the space it creates. What are you then filling that space with? Because it's not about just getting rid of the symptom. It's about hearing what it wants you to hear and to learn. And so in that space, in that silence, if you're quieting that symptom, what are you filling that space with? Are you then talking to your body and connecting with it and working to find that message and to lean into the life it's asking you to live, slowing down if that applies to you? Or are you just filling it with more stuff? Because if you were filling it with more stuff, again, using this hysterectomy analogy, if you're removing stuff and then you're just filling it back up again with other noise or other things, your body's probably going to find another way to get in touch with you, or something else is going to come around. And people who get diagnosis after diagnosis after diagnosis, that can be part of that pattern. Not saying across the board, but if you get a diagnosis and you get that under control, and I'm using quotes for people who are just listening to the audio, by quieting it down, and then you just get back to life as it was. Okay, great. I don't have pain anymore. Now I can get back to life as it was, which feels like the goal, right? When we get sick, exactly like you said, we just want to be ourselves. We want to get back to that life. And so we often do. But then what happens? Either the symptoms come back, the medication stops working, or some other diagnosis comes up. And then we just have this game of whack-a-mole from then on. Ultimately, it's asking you to step out of that life. That's the whole point, is to step out of that life. And so it's a hard thing to sit with. If we never got sick, would we ever heal? This is a big conversation I have with people online, this idea of you're blaming people for getting sick, you're blaming people for having illness. It's not about that. It's not our fault that we get sick. We didn't choose the stuff that happened to us. We didn't choose to believe the things we believe about ourselves, but it doesn't change the fact of why illness is here and that it is here. And so, yeah, we could ignore it and suppress it and try to get back to life. And that's fine. That's a choice. That's an option. But for folks who want to try to shift the story and really hear the message of their body, it is a brave step to take, to try to be like, okay, what is life actually supposed to look like for me? What does my life actually look like? Then this is an option.
I do see you oftentimes having conversations on your page with people who say that you're blaming people for getting sick. And the reality is, we may not have chosen to get sick, and there's no blame. There's never blame in people getting sick. But I would challenge anyone who has gotten sick or knows someone that has gotten sick to say, but did they choose not to? And this isn't about blame. This is about being brutally honest with ourselves and our journey here. Because for me, the answer was yes, I was doing things so that I wouldn't get sick, but I was not actively choosing my life. And I realize there's bills to pay and children to take care of and all sorts of unique situations going on in everyone's life. But something that I have heard time and time again from people who I have spoken to who aren't necessarily at this point in their journey always say to me, but how do you find the time? You either find the time and choose to find the time, or you get sick and you're forced to find the time. And again, there's no blame in that. Everything I'm saying comes from a very loving place that I have had to say to myself, conversations I've had to have with myself, because we can often get caught up in that mindset of this wasn't my fault. The second that you say that it wasn't your fault, you're giving your power away. You're giving your power away to some thing out there. But when you take responsibility for the life that led you to this place, everything becomes easier. The healing becomes easier. The messages find you faster. The people find you faster. The community that you need finds you faster. because you're no longer pushing against it and creating resistance to it.
I definitely wasn't trying to be not sick. I was drinking, I was partying, I was not listening to my body at all. I didn't have the consciousness around it. I wasn't like, I'm choosing to hurt myself today. But when you're in your head and you're pushing yourself, if someone had asked me, do you think you're making good decisions? I probably would have been like, no, I'm not. But you don't care. At that age, I didn't care. And yeah, it's that kind of brutal honesty. Anyone who is able to look at their illness through this lens, that's why this work resonates with people. It's because they are like, I know this isn't how I'm supposed to be living. I know there's something else going on here. I know I'm off track. There's just this knowing that we have. And we conflate blame with responsibility. And I think the issue is that we say, this isn't my fault. So, okay, if it's not my fault, then I'm not responsible for it. If it's my fault, then I'm responsible. If it's not my fault, then I'm not responsible. And it's not either one of those things. It's not your fault and you are responsible because it's your body. Who's going to do it for you? We have this thing of, it's not fair that I should be responsible. It's not fair that I should have to deal with it. And to that, I would say, I agree. It's not fair. It's not fair that the way life happened, it created illness. However, what a gift to be given this thing that is something you cannot ignore. It is a fork in a road. It's a block. It's a thing being like, you got to stop now. You have to get back on track. You have to be yourself. You have to find yourself, because that's what life is. Life is a journey of becoming yourself. It is a journey of soul evolution to become who you came here to be. And illness is the thing that will get your attention if nothing else will, because I don't know about you, but I certainly couldn't ignore my illness. I couldn't get out of bed. And I was 20, I was 20 years old and I was in bed. I could not get out. I was getting a colonoscopy at 20. My friends were like drinking beer at a bar and I was getting, it's like, okay, I'm paying attention. Like, what's going on here? And so the issue, I think, is just the core paradigm we have around illness in the first place, which is we think of it as a curse and a horrible thing. And it is those things. And it's also not. It is hard and it is scary and it is life-changing in this negative way, but it's also life-changing in this other way.
There were many times where I was on my knees in the desert, screaming at the top of my lungs that this is not fair. And on my knees at the rock bottom of my life is when I realized it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's fair. It doesn't matter if it was my fault. It doesn't matter if I'm to blame for it. What matters is the next step. How do I move forward now? And that will get you to that place of living your life, is by letting all of that go. And if it resonates, great, you're on the path. This is the information you're supposed to find. If you're upset about it, you're in a different place. And there's steps to it. As much as we'd like to go from one thing to the next thing and teleport to the next thing, we can't. So there's steps to it.
If there's someone listening who is, let's say, Oriana, like maybe 2017, or maybe even a little later on, when you're starting to feel hopeless or helpless, or you don't want to let go of control, you don't trust people yet, you don't quite have the language for the mind-body stuff yet, wherever that might be in that part of your journey. This is putting you on the spot a little bit, and I apologize. What would you say to them? What do you wish you could have been told in that moment that you think you actually could have received? What would have helped you in that space?
I have been exploring this part of my childhood where this significant heartbreak and abandonment, like my first real heartbreak that I can remember. I've been exploring it very deeply recently. And there was a experience that happened very young in my life. I was like 5 years old, and it was a really big emotional thing for me. It was the moment when I realized that no one was there for me and no one was capable of supporting me. And so I went back to that moment and I took that little girl from inside this really chaotic house where all the adults were acting violent and aggressive. And I took her out of the house and I laid her in the front yard in the grass and I held her hand and I looked up at the stars with her and I said, it might get harder before it gets easier, but it gets easier. When you find yourself on every threshold of, should I take this next step? Always take the next step, because where it leads us to is to a place that we could never imagine where we're at right now. And in that hopeless stage, in that place of everything is going to change and I don't know if I can handle those changes, the best thing you can do for yourself is to say, I can. I am strong enough. I am capable enough, and I can do this. In my journey, oftentimes the symptoms got worse before they got better, and it piles on hopelessness. And every time I found myself in those darkest spaces, I remembered that little girl. And if you can remember those parts of yourselves in those moments and think, what could I have done as me now? All this work that I've done, everything that I've learned about myself, had I been with her in that moment, what could I have done? What could I have held for her just so she didn't have to hold so much? And then you realize how strong you are. And you realize how there's always going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And through every tunnel, the light gets brighter and brighter. And you feel more comfortable carrying it. And you feel more comfortable shining it. And you feel more comfortable in your skin, more comfortable with who you are. And I can't promise that symptoms will go away. I can't promise that whatever expectation of healing people have in their minds is going to happen. But the one thing that I can promise without a doubt through this journey is that you are going to learn amazing things about yourself. And that's what makes it worth it.
Yes. You're finding yourself. You're getting to be the person you came into this world being before life got in the way. And you're allowing that person to come back up to the surface. And yes, beautifully put, the communication of like, what can I give them that they didn't have? What do they need that they didn't get to have? Because ultimately, when we face those barriers, it's because we don't have that foundation to lean back on. Like you're saying, we don't have that trust or that support or that love or that confidence. There's a reason we feel shaky and we feel unsure and we don't know how to move forward. And so this journey is so hard because it asks us to reach down deep and find the things that we never were given and give it to ourselves, and to let that be what helps us move forward bit by bit by bit. And yes, it gets worse before it gets better, because initially we're going down into that belly of the beast. I talk about this as a hero's journey. As you know, we've taught this together. The initial descent is down. We go down into our shadow. We go down into our programming. We go down into these suppressed aspects of ourselves. And we struggle with them. We struggle to feel safe with these things. We struggle to express these things. We struggle to believe in these things. And so it's like a wrestling match. You're trying to hide them or show them. It's just like, I don't know what to do with this. It's scary, but I can see it, and just back and forth. And then you get to this still point, which is at the very bottom of the circle. If you think of the hero's journey as going down around a circle counterclockwise, you get down to the bottom, and that's that liminal space where you are no longer who you were, and you're not yet who you're becoming. And that is almost the worst part, the scariest part. Facing all your shadows is hard, but at least you're doing something. You're like, okay, I can heal this, I can release this. And then you get to this place of, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm not myself anymore, but I'm definitely not this confident new person. And that can be the place of ultimate hopelessness, where we are really asked to reckon with ourselves and surrender to this process. And I know that's hard. And that's why this podcast exists, because you can hear the stories of people who have walked this path and who get to that place and they find their way through and get back to the top. The hero's journey from that bottom place starts to go up. My business is called Aurora Somatic because Aurora in Latin means dawn, and the darkest hour is right before the dawn, right? It's that moment where we're just like, what is happening? Everything is falling apart. Nothing makes sense. And then the sun starts to rise and we start to come back up again, and we start to, oh, this is who I am, and this is what I want, and this is what my body's telling me. And maybe symptoms start to resolve, but it's like you said, you are just learning who you are. And again, truly, to me, what is life all about if not that? If it's not about you just being the most embodied, most you've ever been, it's not easy at all. But when you start to shift from that place of abyss into coming back up to the surface and stepping into that self and starting to really feel the payoff, it all makes sense. And so, yeah, if you feel like you're going deeper and darker, that's part of the journey, and you have to trust that part too.
We all spend so much time on this journey of purpose. And I think it's important to highlight the fact that you just very simply told us what our purpose is to know ourselves deeply. And it seems easy, right? Oh, we just told everyone what their purpose in their life is. But if the people listening know anything about you, there's always nuggets of information, but this one is profound. What if we weren't on this search for our purpose anymore? And we actually took in those words into our soul, that our purpose is just to know ourselves deeply. And that's how we wake up every day living our life. That's the work. And that's what's going to keep us from getting sick or finding ourselves outside of our illness. Not getting sick, that has nothing to do with symptoms. It's how we live our lives every single day. And the only way we live as deeply as we yearn to is by traveling into those depths of ourselves.
Yep. Yes. It's being, right? It's being yourself, being, not doing. It's not an outside thing. It's an inward thing of just being in yourself and figuring out what that means and figuring out how to be in touch with that as much as life makes that possible. Because there's always going to be moments we are taken out of ourselves. We have kids, we have jobs, we have whatever. But the more your life allows you to be yourself, to be in your body, kind of in that flow, right? Like in that feeling of like, I'm following my body's cues. I'm able to rest when it wants me to rest. I'm able to feed it when it wants to be fed. I'm able to drink water and move it the way it wants to move in the environment it wants to move in. The more we can align as much as we can around that, like that's it, right? Yeah. Like you said, it's simple in theory and the most challenging thing in execution. But I will say it's the most challenging thing in execution. But once you get past that threshold, it is actually simple once you get to the other side. And speaking of which, at the end of my podcast, I ask people, who is your illness inviting you to become? Who has it invited you to become? How would you answer that question? What does it look like from here for you? And who has it invited you to become?
I think that flow is a really good word for me, just flowing with what is and what will be. I have become a person that speaks her truth, even if it's uncomfortable. I've become a woman who is standing alone. I have become a woman who is confident in the fact that she's not like anyone else. And I also have become a woman who's proud of herself. And I think that further in the future, for me, I don't have a clear picture of that. And I'm finally okay with that.
I love that. That's the perfect summary of this. Being yourself means you're here. You're just being yourself here. And it's trusting that flow, trusting the process, trusting that you being yourself is going to open the doors that you need to open. It's that surrender and trust. And that is the epitome of letting go of control, not knowing, not knowing where this is going. You're being in your place and being in your life. And that's it. That's a beautiful way to summarize and to really honor this journey you've been on, because that's the epitome of letting go of control. And that's what your illness asked of you. It was to let go and just be. And so here you are. And
here I am. I'm about to finish my book. So
yay!
It'll be out soon.
Do you have a title?
When the Soul Howls.
Oh, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of, you have your Instagram, which I'm going to tag down below, Whispers and Revolutions. Is that where people should follow you to learn about your book?
Absolutely. Yeah. Follow me there to learn about that. I also do jewelry and art and other wearable items as well. And there's another Instagram. My business with that is called Root and Wing. So you can follow there if people are interested in handmade jewelry. A lot of it is around feathers and earth and getting back to the indigenous roots that I didn't necessarily know that I had, that my family has been far removed from, and also finding my own path in that and not to get sucked into one thing. I'm kind of this fluid, ethereal type person. So you'll see that if you choose to follow me. It's a journey to be my friend, even on social media.
I was just thinking you made me those beautiful earrings and I should have worn them for this podcast to be like, and for example, but so it's such an honor to have you back. This feels like a full circle in so many ways. There's just been so much culmination of things that you and I, where we were when we met and where we are now. And it just feels such a beautiful way to come together and have this episode. And, you know, when we had first started working together, I think if you had ever thought you would get a hysterectomy, you probably would have laughed in my face. Or if I had told you, you would have been like, yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. But here we are. And it wasn't that long ago that we were doing our one-on-one work, you know, and I love watching people go through the journey when they are locked in the way that you are, because it just opens doors that you never would have expected. And yet they are the most potent doors when you're in that place of trust and surrender. And again, it's not easy and it's not always clear, but there's that intuitive knowing, and watching you follow that and just talking to you now, you look different, you sound different, you've got a different vibe from when we used to work together, and even just pre-hysterectomy, things have shifted. So it's such an honor to have you here and for you to share your story. Thank you so much for being back with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. If you find this information shared here inspirational and educational, please share it with those you think would benefit from this work. To take this work deeper yourself, check out our website, www.aurorasomatic.com, where you can explore our coaching, community, and course options. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel where new content is coming out all the time, intended to inspire, awaken, and help you deepen your relationship with yourself, your life, and your world. We'll see you next time.